Hello, my name is Matthew Ashdown. Welcome to this conversation today on all things Jinkies and mythology and flower essences. I'm joined by my good friend Dana Kraft, and together we are going to take you on a journey and welcome you into this archetypal energy. So, yeah, be prepared for anything. And that's actually kind of what this theme is about today. Dana, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to everybody?
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you for having me back again on your channel. I'm very happy always to share time with you. And hi, everyone. Thank you for being here and contemplating with us. I'm Dana Kraft. I am a flower essence therapist, herbalist, and traditional naturopath based in Oaxaca, Mexico. But my training, my naturopathy training originally was in the UK, so I have a deep connection myself to the land of Avalon and Glastonbury, and very excited to travel there today with you, Matthew, and see where the flower essences take us.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you. Yeah, as many of you might know, I'm a Gene Keys guide working with the Gene Keys transmission, and it's universal wisdom from across time. And I do have a deep passion. I myself was born in the part of England that is considered to be Avalon. And so it's very dear to my heart. And the mythology that arises out of there is so very much it's about home for me in so many ways. And so over these last 15 years, it has been a fool's journey exploring the wisdom of the myths of Avalon and the stories and mythology related to King Arthur and the Round Table. And just, I love the timeless nature of it. It's like we don't live in a time where there's knights and ladies and lords in the same way as we did back then. But the wisdom that comes through it really serves us still in this day, in this time, in this era. And so that's something I'd love to be able to explore with everybody here today. And we are kind of working with a particular archetype from the world of Gene Keys. And it's the 43rd Gene Key, which moves from the shadow of deafness. What does that mean? The gift of insight and the city of epiphany. And so we're going to lead into that with kind of a little bit of an exploration of one of the characters from mythology that can inspire us to put a face to this archetype. And it's just one face. This is one that we're working with and contemplating. You can put other faces to it. That's the beauty of the Gene Keys transmission. But we're really, when we're looking at the themes today, we're looking at the idea of breakthrough. We're looking at the idea of, being prepared for the breakthrough and of advancing in life with a deep trust in when things come along. The dilemma that we'd be playing with is the dilemma of knowing. And this can lead to, kind of worry and that kind of stuff. And the character that I'm going to pull upon here is one that's well known in the Arthurian myths, and that's Percival. Pierce the veil, Percival. And Percival, he was born to a mother who was quite protective of him. And she, had a bit of a tendency to worry about him and didn't want him to go off and get caught up in all those knightly things because she wanted him close to home. And so, there's probably an element of worry, and she instilled some ideas into him. And, much of his journey as he travels through the domains of this mythology, of this story, is about returning to his connection with his mother in some way. But what he is somebody that's very keen to go out there into the world, and he wants to be a knight. He wants to encounter other knights. He wants to get ever closer to this knight, to become one of these knights of the Round Table. And so he goes off on this journey, and where he epitomizes what we're talking about today in many ways is that he goes out with a certain, you might even call him naivety. This is the fool, right? He's going out there. He doesn't know what he's going to encounter, but that doesn't stop him. He continues to move on, and he has different encounters, and he learns things along the way. He learns them from many of the guides that show up, and often they show up in the form of somebody he's actually related to that he doesn't know he's related to, or that he hasn't had that connection. And so he goes on this journey, And, he's out here searching the Grail, searching for the Grail, and he comes across the Grail in a castle. But one of the things that he has learned from his mother and others, which is it has value in it, is not to ask too many questions. And and so he's in this castle, and rather than asking questions, he just goes along with the sort of the status quo, as it were. And in the end, he leaves the castle and he finds himself abandoned in the castle alone because everyone's like, well, he's not the Grail Knight. He didn't come in here and heal the wound of the Fisher King. So the Grail Castle, we meet the Fisher King, who's waiting for that healing. And so Percival meets him, and they sit, but there isn't that healing taking place. And part of this actually comes from Percival not having asked questions. This is something we discover later on, again, from one of his cousins, I think it is. And so his chance, his opportunity to heal the wounded Fisher King and be part of this Grail connection is kind of lost in that moment. And ironically, it was because, from his youth, from his childhood upbringing, he'd been told not to ask too many questions. And so rather than in this moment, in listening to his own natural curiosity, he led with that conditioned mind. And so a big part of this journey that we talk about is, being willing and being open for the unexpected, being open to tune out the noise of the world that has conditioned us in a certain way or might continue to condition us. We'll talk more about this as we move forward. I know this is part of what's sort of arising. The theme of the 43rd Gene Key is deafness, right? This drowned out by the noise of the world versus that listening to that inner voice. Now, thankfully, Percival gets a second chance. He goes back on his journey, and eventually he encounters the Grail King again. And this time he's listening to the wisdom that he's experienced along the way from others and guides. And at the same time, he's listening in his own moment to the right timing. This key as well has an element of timing to it. We can receive insights from amazing people in our life, but if it lands at a time when we're not prepared, or that there's more to play out first, it's like we don't fully receive that insight. It's the example of somebody lamenting because they told their child, I told them that 15 years ago, and they didn't hear it from me, but they heard it from a mentor when they were 30 years old, and it just dropped in. I might be speaking of myself here. I don't know. Right? It's like my poor mother in that way. And so it's like, yeah, there's this real element that this whole Gene Key invites us to do, which is to return to that own inner listening, that deep inner listening. And to, in some way, it's the rebel that just tunes out the voice of the world around it. And sometimes, we learn from that, because sometimes we can tune out the voice of the world at the expense. There's actually value in what we hear sometimes from the voices from the world. It's just the noise of it, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, but just planting the seed that this is, in order to allow for the breakthroughs, in order for Percival to be able to move forward on this journey, has to enter it with an element of letting go of this need to know everything, of being able to have just this like trust in the flow, in the timing, in what is revealed to him. And so that's kind of the themes that we're going to be continuing to explore today. And Percival might be this archetype you recognize in your own life, and you can cultivate some of the wisdom of the fool that is able to, because oftentimes we think of the fool and we're like, nobody wants to be a fool. I don't want to appear like a fool, but it's like, this is a divine fool. This is the fool that is just able to approach life in such a way that we're not guarded against the unexpected, that we're allowing ourselves to be opened up by that. And that's how we experience throughout life the insight after insight after insight through opening up to the not knowing. And then every so often there's this epiphany that really lands in our being. And Dana, I know you have the 43rd gene key twice in your profile, and it's not one that's in my profile, so I love to hear, let's hear a direct transmission from the 43rd gene key. So I'd love for you to speak to your own experience with this 43, and maybe how, now that I've riffed a little bit on Percival, and maybe there's something that's arising, because it might be that we've got something prepared here and we know what we're going to talk about. But in the nature of the 43rd, it's like, wait a minute, something else is coming through and I got to share this. So it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. I love listening to you talk about myth. And Percival is such an interesting character in the same way of the Fool and the Tarot, so misunderstood in a way. And there is an element of that, feeling misunderstood with the 43rd gene key, in my experience. And this deafness, I know Richard says it in a very specific way in the key, but my interpretation or my version of that is you're deaf to everything except the voice of your own soul. I think he says you're deaf to everything except for the divine or something along those lines. But we're saying the same thing really, which is the deafness from the shadow frequency is that noisiness. It's the inner noise of the excess mental activity and the worrying, or the outer noise. I joke about this one because my son holds the 43rd gene key and his father holds the 43rd gene key at very primary locations. And you can hear this in my house, you will shout to each other, and then someone will be shouting. There can be a force field of really just no one really listening to themselves or each other. It drives me crazy, of course. And a lot of noisiness. I would say in my shadow experience, I tend to be more of a noisy on the inside, and other people around me tend to be noisy on the outside. So I think the big practice with working with that noise, there's two primary essences that really resonate here. One is for the worrying and the active mental noise is the white chestnut flower essence from the Bach Flower Collection. Is an extraordinary essence, really. I mean, this is for, and I think in the modern world we can all relate to this in one way or another, but this is when you are just so mentally dominated. This is the sleepless worry, the just constant noise in the head and hashing things out, and it can have an anxiety, what will happen, feeling place around it, but it's really just mental over dominance. So these are people in the archetype of the white chestnut who desperately want to turn off their minds, who just want to flip the switch because it's so noisy all the time. And the white chestnut has a beautiful capacity for that. And it really helps us bring ourselves down into the body, and it has a very quieting effect. So I love the white chestnut, and it's one that comes up all the time in sessions. It's a fantastic remedy. And the other one that works really well with this is heather, is another Bach flower remedy. Heather is for the noisy, the talker. So these are people who have a deep need to be talking about themselves, almost to acknowledge that they actually exist. It's very interesting to be around heather people. You really feel that energy because they will turn any conversation back into an I talking about themselves, and they will talk without noticing any other cues of people around them. They will talk, sometimes they're, people who will literally like follow you into the storeroom while you're trying to get away from them. But they have a deep need to be heard because they're not listening to themselves. So we're back on this theme. And also what you mentioned about Percival and the questions comes up to the next essence that I choose for today's conversation, which has come up in many of our conversations, Matthew, is Serato. And Serato is all about inner listening. And the Serato person is one who, let's say you have to make a decision, a medium-sized decision, or a large one, they will go and ask everyone. They will ask opinions from anyone. They will talk to their hairdresser. They will talk to the guy on the bus. They will go to every doctor, every therapist, every astrology gene keys, every seer, every tarot reader, without actually remembering to just sit and ask themselves. And those three essences really bring the theme down into the 43rd gene key, which is all about how deeply am I listening to my inner voice? Which for me, and in Bach flower, in flower essence therapy, the inner voice is the voice of the soul. And so then we're back to Percival, because part of being the fool is listening to that voice and following it without questioning, getting caught up in our own programming, overthinking it, talking about it with a million friends. And I think the 43rd key really offers us such a deep possibility for listening to inner wisdom. And once we practice that, listening to ourselves, following the voice of our soul, trusting in our own inner insights, once we have that practice, that knowing that you're talking about and the dilemma of knowing becomes less and less urgent. We can trust. And I think Percival, in many ways, is a story of flailing your soul into the unknown. And I love that. And I have found in my own life that that's the only way forward for me, is to remember to just sit and listen to my own inner voice. And with maturity and life experience, I find it a lot easier. And thanks to the flower essence as well, I find it a lot easier now than in earlier days of my life.
Yeah, to have these supportive aids is, it really makes a difference. And, as you're talking too, it's interesting. I've just been watching a documentary with my wife. And there's been a series of documentaries, it seems, that have come out recently about people who were raised in the music world. And, I find actually a lot of times people with the 43rd gene key have some really deep connection to the music, either inside of themselves, or I know some who are musicians, and, because it has so much to do with that listening, like we said, the inner ear. And so, I was watching this story about somebody, that in my youth I would hear lots about, and his name's Robbie Williams. Some of you might know him. He's the musician Robbie Williams, and he was just like launched into stardom so quickly. And it was so noisy for him, and it was so overwhelming because there's just so many, he had so many adoring fans and everything like that, and just the noise of that experience. And and it was kind of like Percival in some ways, and you see this story throughout, as like not having the wisdom he now has about things, and it's really interesting to see that young, it's almost like there's two different people. He's looking at video of himself when he's younger, and you're seeing his facial expressions and his reflections on it, and you can hear that wisdom and maturity that's come from the experience. And so he was many ways like Percival, in that he had a great fall, and he did return from that fall, but he also fell again, right? And so many times on this path. And so you can really see now how he's like listening to his own innate wisdom. It talked about the time when he split off with his longtime collaborative partner, because he was really listening to what wanted to come out of him versus somebody else. And so there is these journeys with it. And so I think that's so important, like you said, for all of us, and to be able to have these flower essences or whatever it is that we use to support us, to be able to come back to that still quiet inner voice within is so important. And I think it's so important in these times. You and I have had conversations about this right now. Like, we live in the information age, and we live in a time when there's so many people who have an opinion about everything, related to health is a big one. Like, do this for your health, do that, don't do this. And it can be for so many other domains and areas of our life as well. And the 43rd gene key has a programming partner in the 23rd gene key, which moves from complexity to simplicity. So if we consider the shadows here, we've got the complexity that arises from just having so many sources of information coming at us, and being able to really listen to our own inner voice around that, about what is needed for us in this, to still receive that guidance from people around us. But, you know, to believe the doctor that says, you know, this is the only way that's going to cure this, right? It's like versus, you know, the listening to, yeah, maybe sometimes listening to the doctor in this situation is what is needed, but maybe at other times there's another path that I'm being guided to take, to follow, to listen to my own calling in that way. And so, you know, that's something that I think this exploration with this particular key is very, you know, important. I'm also mindful of the fact that today, as we record this, it's not the same day that it comes out, but it's 11/11 today, which is the day in which we have a minute of silence, right, in honor of remembering. So there's, you know, there's the remembering of those who died in war. That's for one form of remembering, but the kind of remembering here is like remembering who we are, remembering the essence of our soul. We've been told and conditioned by the world around us that we are this or we are that, or we aren't this and we aren't that, we should do and we shouldn't do. And it's like, that's all that noise and that complexity. And to be able to return to that still, quiet inner voice. And, you know, this ties into these themes of, like, for so many of us, we're wanting to live, you know, a more easeful life, a more prosperous life. And so much of that comes from this inner alignment with our soul. And if we're not aligned in that way, yeah, it's like how that percolates into every area of our life. And I know you've got some thoughts and reflections on this too, in terms of the prosperity aspect of this, because when we look at the gene key, and so in gene keys we have the programming partner. I want to keep this as simple as for people as possible, so that there isn't the overwhelm and the complexity that we're talking about here. There's what's called a programming partner, which is a, you know, it's a dance with another gene key. And there's also something called a codon ring. And a codon ring is about a partnership between, it's like a chemistry between two different gene keys. And the partnership in this sense is the 34th gene key, which is, it moves from force to strength to majesty. When we try to force our insights upon the world, they may be true, but it may be the wrong time. It may not be appropriate. You know, it's when we have these epiphanies about new inventions and new creations, we often have multiples of them at the same time, because it's like we were ready for that epiphany. And so here with this, it's like this is the wheel of fortune, these two gene keys together. So when the timing is right, when the insight is landed, it can be supported through the strength and the majesty of this 34th gene key. And so together they are the wheel of fortune and that prosperity. And I've seen that in my own life. If I'm trying to make something happen, I receive a great insight and it's like, oh yeah. And I could be trying to make that happen and I'm using force to get it out into the world. But here, when there's strength of the 34 with married to the insight of the 43, and in mythical terms, this is the fool and the king, right? And their correspondence with one another. But it's this wheel of fortune. And so I'd love to hear your reflections kind of on that too. And where does that take you when we begin to contemplate those things?
Thank you, Matthew. Very interesting. Well, I would just pause and say a very important note about flower essence therapy, based on the work of Dr. Edward Bach. Is Dr. Bach said, now, okay, caveat, parentheses within parentheses. My caveat is that he lived in the 1930s. So we know that we are living in a very different world. So what he said was, and this is the basis of flower essence therapy, he said, all disease, without exception, is the result of a separation between the personality and the soul. And all flower essence therapy is bringing those into alignment. And so that we could have lots of conversations about that philosophy and is it still true and all of those things. But from my perspective as a flower essence therapist, yes, this is what we're working on, is this alignment. Because what is prosperity? What is health? What is wellness? What is abundance? Is this alignment of saying, I'm here fully embodied on my mission on this planet. We could use the word purpose. We could use lots of different words, but Dr. Buck also said that of all of his 38 remedies, the most important was one called Wild Oat. And Wild Oat is about finding your purpose. And we could say that that is always adapting. I could say, my purpose was to be a flower essence therapist and a naturopath, and that was my purpose until then I became a mother. And then my purpose also included that part of myself. And so the inner listening is what always is the most important thing, to always say, okay, where do I need to go? What is for the highest good? What is for the highest good of all? What is for the highest good of my soul? And always coming into that alignment practice. And so the inner listening becomes the most important practice, really, in order to be guiding ourselves through that. And to go with this, what the strength, okay, so we're talking about the Ring of Destiny, talking about the Wheel of Fortune, is the wheel moves you. You don't move the wheel. And your soul moves you. You don't move your soul, if you will. I'm getting a little bit semantic here, bring the energy back down. But what we're talking about is when your soul is guiding the vehicle, your soul is what creates the movement. That's the Wheel of Fortune, is that your soul is taking you where it needs to take you. And it is about allowing that process to happen and being enthralled with that in some way and trusting. I'm always going to come back to that word trust. I'm always going to come back to that word faith, because how do we do anything that we do? Because we trust. And we can only trust if we're hearing this voice that says it's this way.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that trusting element is, I think, is so key to, it's key to so many things in life, but it's key to this. It's trust. Can we trust in the simplicity of it? In a world where we've been conditioned to believe in the complexity, can I trust in the simplicity? Sometimes people are provided with very simple solutions. I know I have been in my life where it's been, oh, that's too simple. And so I haven't fully received it. And later determined, oh, wait a second, there was such simplicity in that, and there was such value in that. And do we trust the insights that we receive? And I think one of the things that we talk about too, like, so the gift is insight and the city is epiphanies. And so what's that truly about? Because I can receive insights and I can receive them on the mental and the emotional plane in that sense. The breakthroughs really happen when there's that shift on the emotional plane, when there's that, I really allow myself to be with the presence and allow for it to transmute. And so we might receive many insights throughout the day. And it's like, ding, ding, light bulb going off here, there, everywhere, right? And then how often we have the true epiphanies, the epiphanies, we experience that in an embodied way. So when we think of contemplation, we've heard us referring to that a few times today. Contemplation is often thought of as a mental thing. Right? I'm sitting here contemplating. That's the thinking part of it. And to really embody this as an epiphany is to go through with include all the thinking, the emotion, and the physical. And so any of this work, this is why the support of flower essences, the support of the world around us is part of the epiphany, because it's helping us. This is about the embodiment. An insight can exist on one plane in one dimension, and the breakthroughs happen when it's like fully landed throughout our whole being and our whole body. And there's a body of work in the Gene Keys transmission called the 7 Sacred Seals. And the 43rd gene key that we're talking to today is one of these 7 sacred seals. And it is here to heal the wound of rejection. This is what the essence of this. And in a way, it's like cultivating a sense of divine rejection, because it's recognizing and realizing that there is no, in truth, we are never rejected and there is no rejection, but it's going through that journey with that, and really knowing that, and deeply embodying that in our lives. And so at the there can be this experience that we're rejecting. We can reject what's good for us sometimes, but at the same time we can also reject that which is meaningless, or reject that which is causing more inefficiency in our lives, and that kind of thing. This gene key has a lot to do with that kind of efficiency. And when we work with this, it's funny, you've used the word soul, and when we work with this fourth sacred seal, it's the causal plane, which is, we have the mental, the emotional, the physical, and then we have the causal plane. It's this fourth plane of existence, so to speak. And so the soul is, we are then in this field with so many other people on this planet. There's a group soul for planet Earth, as it were, an oversoul of planet Earth, if you will. And so one of the things that arises out of this fourth sacred seal is this idea that we are the breakthrough, or we are the epiphany, rather. We are the epiphany. So I kind of alluded to it before, but it's like each of us having these journeys through life, and that these breakthroughs come at certain times. It's almost like it's pre-programmed into our being. And like you talked about this wheel of fortune, the wheel of fortune, the wheel that's moving. It's like we think we're in charge of when the epiphanies happen, right? Or we think we're in charge of the breakthroughs. And really, when we're working with this gene key and those associated with it, it's coming in, opening up to that deeper trust that the epiphanies that we experience arise when we prepare the soil. We can do what we can, like we can prepare the soil, but when we make those leaps, first of all, making leaps in his journey was that leaping across the abyss, leaping across, quite often it's a stream that separates the night from the other world, which is in many ways is when they're approaching the fairy kingdoms and things like that. And so there's these leaps that take place that only can occur in the space of the not knowing, that trust in the not knowing. I don't have the answer right now, but can I trust that what I need is going to show up to me? I'm going to have the answer when I need it. That I don't know what this person needs in this moment because they're not here in front of me, but then when they're here in front of me, perhaps it's there. And so this is the city of Epiphany, this fourth sacred seal. We've got these epiphanies, these breakthroughs that are coming to humanity, and they can come in a flash. And then there's it's like we can receive the insights on a collective level, but then there's the allowing that to move through the various densities so that it becomes fully embodied on this earth plane. And so I don't know if you've been working with the 7 sacred seals and any flower essences or anything like that, but I wonder if you have anything you wanted to speak to in terms of this fourth sacred seal.
So interesting. Thank you, Matthew. As you're talking about the seal and the soul, the other essence that's sort of dancing around is the gem essence of diamond. And the gem essence of diamond is that brings the energy into the physical body. Now, we might talk about other seals that are more directly related to the physical body, but it's very much what we're talking about in terms of this embodiment practice. The epiphany has to come through the vehicle. We're in the vehicle. And so that combination of the 3 essences that I mentioned with diamond, that's 4 essences, which I never do, but there must be a magic with the 4th seal there.
Cheeky.
I never do 4 essences, so those are the ones that came in today. Is the Serato, Heather, White Chestnut, and Diamond. There are others that come up for embodiment practices, of course, but I think those four, what we're really talking about is bringing ourselves into alignment with the soul so that the collective soul is also, you're plugging yourself in. You know, this inner listening is about plugging into what is already there. That's what we're talking about. And any of us who are meditators, this happens, this must be a 43 thing, where you just stop meditating because you're so busy thinking about things. Um, and then you remember something happens and you, oh, I've just been living in my mind for 24, 36, 72 hours or whatever the case may be. And something brings you back and you just have to go click. And that takes time, you know, to have, it is a practice, especially for those of us with this 43rd in our charts or in our lives that's coming alive for us, is you have to have that ability to find your click. You know, one thing we do in our practices here is finding something called a sit spot. Now, a sit spot is somewhere that you sit every single day because it's an observation place. It's where you sit to watch the birds. It's where you sit to hang out with your favorite borage plant, which is what I do. You know, it's wherever, but you have this one spot and it becomes something in the brain where you sit in that spot and you know it's your place that you can easily, wow, the meditation cushion at the altar, you know, you can have a lot of sit spots. Something about that practice so that when it's time to do so, we can more easily do so. And also that the epiphany, when it comes to find us, knows where to find us, if you will.
Yeah, I like that. Absolutely. And you can just, you know, the resonance in the field that is built up on the physical dimension and the, you know, the other planes of dimensions when we're sitting in those places consistently. And like you said, there's that joy that, you know, it's why so many, you know, for a true initiation to take place, we need to create what's called a liminal space, and a liminal space is one that is supporting that transformation. And it's why the elders of different traditions will guide people and work within ritual spaces. That space is, you know, that space that we enter into. And so, yeah, to have the meditation cushion, or what's that spot in your home? It could just be a chair you sit on, but it's always that. My grandfather, who was definitely a thinker, he used to have this sign beside his desk, and it just said, sometimes I sits and thinks and sometimes I just sits. And you know, that for me, that's like, yeah, that can kind of really sum up that journey with the 43 is like, where am I sitting here, and am I sitting with that presence like you said, or am I just caught up in the mind and the thinking? And am I thinking too much? Am I thinking too much about what others said and da 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 da? And but so to have that space where it's just like, oh yeah, I'm coming here and this is my space of contemplation. And I like how you said it's like, now it's like the epiphany can GPS and like, okay, we got the right, this is where he's sitting now. This is where when he's ready for that breakthrough, let's just send it in there, right? Because that makes it easier for everybody. So I like that. I get that. You know, we're coming to the close here. We've had a really good, it feels very rich. And, you know, what I always trust in these spaces too, when Dana and I come together, or any of us come together and we contemplate these 43rd, it's not because we're saying, okay, in fact, this is, you know, very much what this 43rd Gene Key is about. It's not saying, oh, okay, we know everything there isn't to know about this Gene Key, and so we're going to just tell you and leave you with it. It becomes a space of exploration. It's like we've gone on our own journey with this. You know, that's why I said at the beginning that Percival is one that I connect to. Maybe you've got another mythological character that's just sort of leaping out at you. And so there's not about the right or wrongness of any of this. It's about allowing ourselves to really just explore this with that openness and just that the trust that we talked about there. And so as we're entering into this work, it's like this comes alive in me. I'm sure it comes alive in Dana. It's like this is a living transmission. So now the next 48 hours are we're like, okay, I'm paying attention. You know, I've brought my attention, you know, what we focus on, whether we want to or not. Like I always tell people, if you say, don't think of a red hat. It's like there's a red hat in your mind, right? And so we've cultivated this archetype in this space today. And so when over the next few days, look for those themes in your life where you're caught up in the thinking, when there's just so much noise and you don't even realize, you might not even realize how irritated you are by the noise, but come down into that. And that can be the, that can be that can be where the breakthroughs can happen, because we're allowing ourselves to notice that agitation or noticing that frustration or whatever it might be. Even before we were creating this, we were having to set up the room, weren't you, Dana? Because there was the noise of the light. There was different lights in different ways. And so it's like coming through to that, what's needed in this moment right here, right now. And it might be different to what's, light in windows is a great example, because throughout the day it moves around. So it's like we have to be on our feet. We have to be paying attention. We have to be able to listen to our own inner guidance that way. So if I was to say anything for any of us here right now, is we are the fool stepping out into the unknown, and we can step out in trepidation and worry, which is what that shadow's about, and overthinking and getting everybody's opinion. So what's the journey you're beginning at this time? Is it a health journey? Is it a finances journey? Is it a relationship? Is it a journey in the world? And where is your state of being with this? Is there a part of you that's just like, I got to have it all mapped out before I get there? Or I got to check in with every single person? One of the things, here I said I was going to round it up, but then something just pops in. That's the way this is. When we work, there's a program within the Gene Keys transmission called the Dream Arc. And in the Dream Arc, people have dreams. And so you might come forward and you're like, yeah, I had this show up in my dream. What do you think that means? Nothing like dream interpretation to get 1,000 different answers. And so if you're working with your dreams, if your dreams can be spaces for cultivating breakthroughs, it's like, yeah, what is that for you? And even not overthinking it. It's like, the mind can get, oh, well, what does that mean? Was that? I've had so many dreams where in fact, I had one recently. 2 months ago, I had a dream, and at the time it was like, what does all this mean? 2 months later, certain events have played out, and it's like, boom, all the clarity just dropped in. And so it was just, there was that trust, there was something in there to pay attention to, but I didn't need to figure it out with the mind. I allowed for that cultivation. And, that's that, approaching that this way. I don't have the 43rd gene key. So I'd love to hear from you, Dana, just as like a roundup, so to speak, of what would any final sort of thoughts or insights for people who are cultivating this archetype in their life, whether you have this gene key in your chart or not?
Mm-hmm. Practice inner listening first. Let's just imagine that every human on this planet had that practice of I'm just going to keep checking in here. I'm going to keep checking in here. How much the energy on this planet would be able to center itself into the heart? How much the frequency of the heart would be at the correct, peaceful, easeful vibration? Because we know that the frequency of the heart is setting the frequency of our auras. There's great scientific research for the scientific people out there, from the Heart Math Institute, if you want to check it out. But we want to always be coming in first. And this is a practice that, I've got double 43, so it's certainly been a challenge for me. However, I think that everyone on this planet, there's so much distortion, there's so much noise, as you mentioned, there's so much information, stimuli. What are the ways that we can consciously commit to just practicing listening to your inner voice, practice trusting your intuition, practice finding your own connection with yourself? And we hear this from a lot of different ways, and I'm keeping it as simple as I can, of course, but that would be the simplicity in this regard is crucial. Just the simple act of practicing trusting and listening to and trusting your own inner voice.
And you will feel like a rebel because sometimes that inner voice will challenge the whole world in that way. It could challenge your whole family lineage. It could challenge your whole, but it's not coming from a need to destroy the family lineage or anything. It's coming from a, no, this is just the next breakthrough in the family lineage. And so that's often one of the first voices that we kind of rise through. So beautiful. Thank you. Keep it simple, folks. That's a big piece of this, and really returning to that. This is a time when there's just so much information. There's so much news coming at us with different opinions about different things, and we have to really listen to for ourselves. It's like, what is it that's needed for me? Trusting that is actually serving the whole, because we're all interconnected in that way. So yes, beautiful exploration today. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for Percival for your little story of inspiration. And thank you, Dana, for your shares. And we'll have the different flower essences. We'll have some things written in the write-up below so people can see that way. And until next time, this has been a great conversation. Looking forward to more explorations through mythology and gene keys and the flower essences, and the fool's journey has begun. I don't doubt that because we've talked about the fool's journey, that some kind of fool's journey is beginning. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.